they were on the other side of the rock cliff. So we were so close, I could hear them talking on the radio and like hear them scurrying around and stuff. So it was like, if you get up to that cliff, you know, everyone's gonna get shot in the face and we're screwed. We took a handful of casualties on the assault. Like the shrapnel from the 105s is like, you know, splashing down into like the creek bed and stuff. I was like, everybody stand down, but I was like literally on my back. I don't think it was physically possible to get out of there.
What was the mission that you guys were going over to Afghanistan to do? And did you go with a group of people, or were you like a individually mobilized?
I was basically like a company infantry combat advisor. And so like I went pretty much by myself. Like I got individually mobilized. I went up to Indiana and did PMT, pre-mission training and stuff like that. They would take some of the more seasoned like infantry guys, because not all the guys were infantry or anything like that, you know, but like we covered down on the entire, we basically tried to make the Afghan army like the American army. And so they would have like a logisticians go, they would have mechanics go, they would have the infantry kind of guys go. And so like I got assigned like an Afghan infantry company. Like I just lived with them, you know, for over a year.
You had a long day during that deployment. Somebody gave you an award for it. And I know you don't talk about it, and it's something I had to kind of drag out of you during our podcast prep, but I would like to talk about that day because there's a lot more that happened than just you. Can you walk us through the engagement that you got on that day that ultimately led to you getting a Bronze Star?
It was a named operation because we had a higher 82nd Battalion, so we were part of the bigger plan, so it was a relatively large scale thing. But then I think somebody saw activity on a hilltop, then there was like a little bit of fire. We did a little bit of maneuver, and then they started to pin down, it was a Taliban entity on the top of like a mountaintop or hilltop, kind of in between a hill and a mountain. Like it was a long run up there. But anyway, so they did the thing, they kind of isolated, and then me, the Afghans and I, we started to kind of assault up. These guys were like lions. Like for that little slice of the ANA, Afghan National Army, like these guys were like Afghanistan first, put the tribal shit away, like our company, you know, I loved it. And so like literally my problems with ticks with them was I couldn't keep them under control. Like they would charge, they would run up the mountain, they wouldn't use supporting fire, you know, and stuff like that. And so half the time I'm at risk trying to get them back under control.
Like cats.
Yeah. Anyway, so the Afghans and I, we started to kind of assault up very rocky area, big rocks. So there was some opportunities to get cover, and then there were some relatively open areas. So we were able to assault through, but the way that we were kind of assaulting and then they were kind of hopscotching along this ridge line, they got out of effective fire from all the trucks. So by the time I had got to the top of the hill, I couldn't even really see the trucks anymore because the way that it snaked around with the terrain, because we were kind of in pursuit. So we kind of fought our way up there. I think we took a handful of casualties on the assault. We lost a handful of Afghan guys that were wounded at the very bottom, but they were still close enough where they could get scooped up by the American convoy. But then we fought all the way up to the top. You know, I always kind of second guess myself on this. Get to the very top and I could hear them on it was like almost like a 5-foot rock cliff plateau, and I knew that they were on the other side of it. But it was just the way the terrain was, and we were all huddled there, and we were like trying to assault through, but it was just like too dicey to like scale up that thing and get shot in the face. I didn't have any more grenades or nothing. And so like they were close, and like we had already put a good dent into them. And I think all their radio traffic was principally like them saying like, hey, you know, Muhammad is down, or this guy's down, or whatever. Like they were kind of doing crisis action.
You could hear?
I could hear them physically talking on the radio on the other side of the rock face. So it was like we're at the top of the mountain, but like at the very top of the mountain, it was like this rock cliff and like a little plateau, and they were on the other side of the rock cliff. So we were so close, I could hear them talking on the radio and like hear them scurrying around and stuff. So it was like real chaotic. And I almost like, I thought about this a lot. I should have just assaulted through, but like it just didn't feel right, like the way the terrain was, to like scale that cliff and then like just try and like cannonball on top of them or whatever, because I was thinking like, if you get up to that cliff, you know, everyone's gonna get shot in the face and we're screwed. We kind of got a little bit of a lull in the fire and we started to kind of like move a little bit. Then we got into like another engagement. But anyway, at the end of the day, it was like we were doing like a planned withdrawal. We've killed, I think, in my opinion, we had killed everybody that we could potentially have killed or whatever, and they just had the remnants up there, but it just wasn't making sense to go there and finish the job. So anyway, we start to like retro back down to get out of it. And meanwhile, the way the positioning was, we were always in some kind of fire. So that's what was precluding us from like basically assaulting through and like basically putting a bow on it. We did take a couple wounded up there. So I was like, all right, this is starting to get away from us. So I kind of made the call to start retrograding down, and there was like a draw that turned into like a dry creek bed, and so we were like able to kind of fight our way out away from them and get into that like creek bed. Had relative cover because at the very top we had no cover, so I was like, we're completely exposed here and we've lost the initiative, so I'm not going to be able to assault through. So we kind of got back into this creek bed, and there was a couple big rocks and stuff that were for good cover. But once we got in that creek, and meanwhile I'm communicating with the 82nd, and that, you know, I'm trying to maneuver my Afghan guys, very chaotic casualties.
Are they giving you guys a support by fire, or are they kind of pinned down as well?
No, they were out of, like, they're all truck bound. So yeah, they had brought some later in the fight, they brought Americans a little bit closer, but not, I don't think they really wanted to turn the corner dismounted because they would have put themselves in a bad position. So anyway, we got down to this creek bed. So I'm probably like maybe anywhere from like a 250 meters from the threat, like where they had the high ground where I was at, and then I was probably like maybe a click from the 82nd. But once we got to that creek bed, we got kind of stable, but we were no longer in a position to retrograde, because once you got out of that creek bed, you're like completely exposed. So if we just like went into full retreat mode, everyone would have got shot. So, but by this time, my interpreter was shot, a bunch of Afghan guys were shot. I was the only American, you know what I mean? It was me, and it probably started with like 40. And then by that time, like effectively people fighting was maybe like, you know, high 20s or 30. And it was literally like, they had the beat on us. So like you couldn't literally like, if you moved like if I saw a guy and he would move his head, it was like, you know, dust right next to him. I was like, everybody stand down, but I was like, literally on my back, and I think it was a embedder, and I was like with my like laying on my back so I could like take my antenna and stand it up just so I could communicate with the gun trucks or the Delta Company command element. So at that point, Jeremy, who was the commander, like I'm talking to him, I was like, this is the deal, and, you know, and he was tracking the fight the whole time, you know what I mean? I was making a cognizant decision to keep him as informed as possible, because he's the only one that could help me. And then so he was like literally calling Task Force Gun Devil, which was the 82nd 319th Field Artillery Battalion, and they were shooting 105s where the enemy was at. But it was, since I was within like 200 or so meters, it was like danger close. So yeah, like literally, like the shrapnel from the 105s is like, you know, splashing down into like the creek bed and stuff. But then like we tried to like do that and then like pull out, but I think it was like, you know, it was basically like a 600 meter sprint to the next cover. So then they brought in the fast movers, but like that was a non-starter.
Yeah, because initially you guys tried to call in jets and they were kind of useless.
Yeah, I couldn't talk to them. Like, I mean, it might have been my own operator headspace, but like, you know, they run on different like frequencies. And then I was like, it was a big old, you know, thing about like, hey, this dude's got to go to, you know, FM or whatever to talk to me. And then like I finally like made contact and like, but he was out of range so fast because they fly so fast. And then he was like, bingo on fuel. I'm like returning to station. I was like, well, fuck, that didn't work out. Finally, they dispatched Apaches from Kandahar airfield. And then they got on station. I never knew this, but they have letters written on the belly of the aircraft, you know what I mean? And so I would never understand why, but like that's for me to know who I'm talking to. So the guy was like, hey, I'm in Bird Kilo or whatever. He's like, where are you? And I was like, signal out. Can you, I had like a little VS-17 thing in my pocket. I was like, he's like, I see you, dude. You know what I mean? It's like, you're hard to miss. Yeah. So it's me, and all the Afghans wore green BDUs. So it was like, we're all like just laid out in this thing. They have that ability to loiter, and it's always two ships. So one's kind of like watching the other one, so they came around and they're like, hey, we're going to come around and do a smoke run on these dudes. And then like, you're going to tell me. By this time, I think they kind of went to ground because they, the bird of death was in the air. But like they came around and did smoke.
So they would just drop smoke and...
No, they'd shoot smoke, and then I would be like, okay, 150 meters, like whatever it was, 270 degrees or northeast, whatever. And then like they're like, okay, boom. And he comes around again and just... And then like came around again, and then came around again and did rockets. And like, I was like, okay, good. And so like at the second racetrack he did, I was like, everybody get up. Because it was a whole Sanford and Son endeavor to pick up all these wounded cats. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, it's like, it was just real messy. Totally like steep, weird, crazy terrain, bunch of wounded cats. And so like we kind of like cobbled everybody together, and there was no litters or anything. It was like everyone got to get someone fireman's carry. You know what I mean?
And so, you guys were walking them off a mountain face?
Yes. Like it was literally like you had to pick everybody up. The terrain was like, it wasn't like picking somebody up and like going on a football field. That was like you're walking down like steep stuff.
Yeah. It's really hard. I had another podcast guest here. We were talking about Afghanistan, how in some places it just looks like Mordor from like Lord of the Rings.
Right.
People who haven't been there, I think they just really don't appreciate, like we fought in some very steep mountainous terrain.
It was very El Paso-esque. I remember thinking that after the fact. It was
because the South is desert-ish with mountains. Right?
Yeah, but like big rocky outcroppings and stuff like that, and like place where you should watch your footing if you don't want to like sprain your ankle. But anyway, then we withdrew, and then like the 82nd Dismount guys like met us, and First Sergeant Stitzel was there, and then he kind of coordinated the equivalent of a casualty collection point swap, but it was really like not to render aid, it was to like everybody was too smoked to carry these guys the next 500 meters. So like then the Americans started carrying the Afghans off and stuff like that. Then we got back the trucks and whatnot, and then like basically got to a not necessarily a covered and concealed position, but like an open area is what were safe there. Like hiding wasn't a safe bet. So we just drove to a place, and then like boom, all the helicopters came in, and
you guys Medevac your dudes out.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So they were really, I mean, there was some dead guys. Like I remember, like Jeremy was coordinating the whole Medevac. He was a brilliant tactician.
He also wasn't on the side of the mountain with you either. So.
True. Yeah. I mean, I'm kind
you
of
do
like,
a little bit more when you're not pinned down with machine gun fire.
I'm kind of like, he was the smart ranger. I'm like the strong ranger. You know what I'm saying? But like we got to safe here, and then all the Medevacs came. But then like we had a handful of dead, and they're like, we can't take the dead. And I was like, you guys are taking the dead. Like we're not going to drive around with these body bags and shit with these cats because we're God knows where. But then really the named operation was coming to an end. I think a day or two later, a Chinook came and got me and the rest of the Afghan companies, and then the 82nd drove it on in. You know what I mean? So I mean, we were basically kind of combat ineffective.
How did that sit with you? And how did you deal with that on the Afghan side? Helping that commander process that?
Yeah, I mean, the thing about the Afghans have a more fatalistic way of like looking at stuff. You know what I mean? They're just like, this is war, like people kind of die.
I would imagine they're used to it at some point.
Yeah, and I think they've seen so much death and heartache their whole lives. Like it's just like, or just had, a brother die from a disease when they were young because of lack of like adequate medical coverage.
Yeah, when you're living in the mountains,
you're a hardened person. But yeah, some of them like took it kind of pretty rough, and then some of them were like hell bent on revenge, like screaming and like wanting to like which I was like, that's not good either. Like you know what I mean. So it's like I think we rode around for like another day, and I was like, I think I need to like pull my cats so they can go refit or whatever. But then Ken White, rest in peace, the Lurse guy that I befriended, he took me to the Apache pilots in Kandahar like a week later, and I got to like thank him and stuff.
What was that like?
Well, it was just really, it's like, I don't know, like line infantrymen, like they kind of like look at Army aviation as like kind of like divas and stuff like that, because it's like, oh, crew rest, can't do this, too windy, yada, yada, yada. But I just told him, I was like, and then like Ken actually had video and stuff like from their cameras or whatever, which is lost to the dustbin of history. But like, he was a cool, like, lurch kind of dude. So he just kind of walked into their headquarters and be like, hey, I'm Sergeant First Class Ken White. And you know what I mean? We were in this contact over in this place. I was like, are these guys around? So he took him a day or two to find them, but I was able to say, like, yeah, I mean, without a doubt, you know, they were lifesavers. Like, I don't think it was physically possible to get out of there. And one of my dear friends, Scott Nicholas, who was the 36 Combat Aviation Brigade commander, who's an Apache guy, I actually told him that once when we were just talking. I didn't go into any of this detail, but like, I was like, you know, that's really like, you guys, you know, in certain situations, you're the only thing that could save somebody's life.
I know you carried a piece of that shrapnel back with you. I think
it's the 82nd gave me like a little, it's in my gym, but it's a real rudimentary thing. Their company was the Misfits, you know, like the Crimson Ghost Misfit skull from the punk band. It's all this tape and they spray paint the same thing. They had it on all their trucks and stuff. So they made a plaque and it's the Misfit skull, and then they all wrote like their names on it, and then they glued the piece of shrapnel. Because I put it in my pocket, or I didn't. No, someone else did, and then they gave it to me, and then so I was holding on to it. Afghan guy had it, and he gave it to me because I could see it like, you know, splashing. So they super glued that to like the plaque. It's like the most ghetto plaque you've ever seen, but it's probably one of my favorites. Yeah.
When you look at that like piece of metal, even now, all these years later, like what does it mean to you?
You know, honestly, like I haven't even really thought about that whole day and long time, and like, you know, the whole fanfare of the award and all that, like that took a while to take to fruition because we were in such a weird you know, I was a individual augmentee from Texas with the 76th Infantry Brigade combat team. The award went up through the 82nd chain of command, and then went up to like whatever, you know, the you know, task force whatever in Afghan, and then everybody rips out, and so it was like this delayed thing. So I just kind of like, it's in the past. That's never gonna happen. And then like it finally, you know, some people got involved. Really, the 82nd like guys, like the first sergeant, the commander and stuff, like they were the ones who like did the write up and did the whole thing, and then I ripped before them, and then like,
yeah, because originally you were put in for a Silver Star.
Yeah. Then they shifted the whole thing to National Guard Bureau, and then it went up again. And like I was literally like, there's no way that everything's in. So I basically forgot about it. So I came back. I had went to SF selection. I got married. I already went through the whole Q course. And then like I got it like 6 months after. So it's just like, you know what I mean? So at that point I was like, that shit's ancient history. Like, no.
What was it like when you get the award to relive that day in your brain? Because I know you, man. You're not like hey, I did this yesterday. And I'm sure you kept moving forward in your career. You stayed busy, and you probably don't spend a lot of time on that day in your brain. What was it like to go back to like revisit that?
Yeah, I mean, they were gonna try and make it a big deal, and I was like, I appreciate everyone that got involved to try and circle the wagons to try and get this done. One of my mentors from G Company, Sergeant Major Calloway, who had nothing to do with any of this, like he interjected on like the NCO side to like try and advocate for it, because it was just getting jammed up at all these different echelons, and then like, you know, the G1 person at whatever would retire, and there'd be a new G1, and you know, they had a stack of paper. So, I mean, but they wanted to do like a big old ceremonial thing, and I was like, if it's all the same to y'all, like, I don't want none of that. It was like in a conference room with like maybe 6 or 7 people. That was it. And then really, I mean, it just basically, you know, Xeroxed a copy of it, put it in my folder, and then like went back to work, and that was it. I mean, it's ancient history at that point. And that's the thing with like, there's people that do kind of great stuff all the time, but if there's nobody to watch it or document it, like, it's just lost to the, you know, like, you know, so it's like somebody decided to do a write-up on me. That doesn't mean like, I mean, there's people that have done thousands of things better than that were never witnessed, and so they're never going to get recognized.
Yeah.